Let me start with the kind of anecdote. As you probably know, 2 weeks ago, EDPS has organized a big conference about enforcement and the future of enforcement of privacy in the EU. And just when we prepared the program of this conference, I went with it to the civic society organizations to consult it with them, including BEUC, which is the Federation of the Consumer Associations from Europe. And I thought that I'm coming to them with a very nice overview of the things to discuss about. And actually the answer from them was, is it for bureaucrats? You are talking about procedures. You are talking about the legal acts. You are talking about the cases. Where is the human being here? Where is the person? Where is the complainant? You should look at this from this point of view. And I would say that this is the line of or rather the main matrix of the cooperation with the consumer protection authorities, who remind us the thing which we are theoretically very proud of, which is that we are not data protection authorities, because we are not protecting data. We are protecting the human being who is over this data and whose data is possessed. So then it comes as a kind of, do I have this nice device? This is the starting point of the discussion on this cooperation. Of course, the two words about the difference between EDPS and EDPB, for those of you who are less familiar with the topic, the European Data Protection Supervisor is the supervisor of the EU institutions, bodies and agencies. So I'm not the super top data protection authority in Europe. I'm the one who is responsible for supervision of the Commission, of the European Parliament, of the Council and the agencies, no matter where they are. But what is more important probably for today's discussion, the EDPS is also the main consultant in the legislative process in the European Union. So at the point where the national authorities are taking part in the legislation process on the national level, this is EDPS who is the main advisor in the EU, although more and more, in more and more situations, we try to prepare the joint opinions. We are asked for the joint opinions, or we are consulting with the EDPB as the representative of the member states and also as those who are responsible for supervision of the market, of the business. So EDPS is at the same time the supervisor himself, but we are also the members of the European Data Protection Board. So we are also taking part in the actions of the European Data Protection Board, and we try to be very active there because we know that only the things which are done on the European scale with the full harmonization of the approach between the data protection authorities may be really successful. And it's also worth mentioned that wherever we think about the enforcement roles and enforcement activities of the data protection authorities, we shouldn't forget that it was quite clear for all the history of the DPAs that they play more broad role. And just citing the things which were said years ago by Bennett and by Raab, they wrote the first article on that in 2006, as far as I remember. We are, as data protection authorities, at the same time auditors, enforcers, we are negotiators, we are consultants, educators, policy advisors, international ambassadors, and this is how we do understand it in the European Union and how the data protection authorities like to see each other. And of course, the independence, which has been underlined here several times, have their big pros, but it's also a kind of challenge. When I first time in my life went to the Working Party of Article 29 meeting, Working Party of Article 29 was predecessor of EDPB, I was very skeptical. When I tried to think about this 29 persons at this time with extremely high ego, being very independent, especially independent from those who are around, I really didn't think they will ever get any agreement. And I can say EDPB and earlier Working Party of Article 29 is a big exercise on compromise, on finding the common road to go somewhere and to solve the situations which are not black and white, which are not binary. There are at least 27 approaches, or rather 31, I would say, at the moment, because there are 31 full members. But of course, you can imagine that in Germany, there is 17 others presented by the land authorities. So that has to be done with the full remembrance about independence, but also impartiality, integrity, transparency, and the kind of pragmatism. And whenever the people ask me, what do we miss when UK is not taking part in the EDPB anymore? Apart from the people whom we miss very much, we miss the good examples and we miss the kind of pragmatism which was given by our British friends. And this year, we started to discuss the outcomes of the reform and the missing parts, those that are still to be done, and the adjustments that we can do according to the rules that are on the table, so according to the DPR. As you heard yesterday, because I know that Gwendal was presenting that very precisely, in April, the EU Data Protection Commissioners met on the level of commissioners, so not the experts, but the commissioners themselves, so in Vienna, and prepared the kind of main points to be done in the nearest future to use the whole potential that GDPR gave as far as the enforcement and the actions on the market are concerned. And that included this cooperation on strategic cases, that included discussion about the administrative obstacles that exist in Europe, that included the work on the support pool of experts, which Gwendal is the head of, and which was the proposal given by EDPS to the EDPB, and about the coordinated actions that we try to do all together around Europe. But at the same time, already in the strategy of EDPS for these 4 years, which we took in 2020, we decided that we are going to organize in 2022 the conference on how should we look ahead. I don't know if you realized, but in January this year, it was already 10th anniversary of the draft of GDPR. Because the draft of GDPR appeared on 25th of January 2012. So we are already 10 years in the discussion, and few years after the text have been created. So we decided to think for the future, to think in the longer perspective. In 2024, there will be the new European elections and the new European Commission. I'm sure that this Commission, the commissioners who will come, will not remember the discussion about GDPR, most of them. And parliamentarians, those parliamentarians who were very active during GDPR discussion will not be in the parliament probably as well. That's the time when the generation will change. The people will remember this discussion about Digital Governance Act, the Digital Services Act, and Data Act, but they will not remember the discussion about GDPR. We shall be, as the data protection community, prepared for that, and to have the real assessment of what was good and what went wrong. So with all these policy discussions which we do at the moment, we decided to come to the question, what is this perspective that we see at the moment? And the maps that you know, that you saw many times, which show us the formal approach to the data protection. 2016, the last map which was presented so far, 2021. But I know that you wrote already in your report that there are 157 countries which have comprehensive data protection regulation. And now my question is, what does this map say to us? And the answer is almost nothing. Because it does not say to me that Russia is the country which has a comprehensive system of data protection, despite the fact that Roskomnadzor is a very strong data protection authority. But they have also other tasks which undermine their position as the real data protection authority. The fact that China has a comprehensive data protection law is absolutely true. The problem is that this is not exactly this point of view on the role of the data protection law than most of the countries on this map show. And the fact that white hole here is the USA does not mean that they are at the same place where Mozambique is at the moment. Yeah? So then we can look on what the business proposed, or rather what the law firms working with the business propose instead of that. I'm not saying that that's the best proposal, but this is what the LA paper does already for years. And as you can see, the result is completely different than the one that we had on in the previous maps. So the assessment of the situation is definitely the thing which has to be done on the everyday basis by all of us. That I skipped, but of course that was to show that we are discussing the European issues already without UK, but at the same time trying to hear what's going on in the other jurisdictions. Because despite our great proud of the achievements of the GDPR, we have to look how the development looks like in the other jurisdictions. And UK is in these specific situations. Because on one hand, when we ask, is making the changes in the EU, in the UK law, is it dangerous for the adequacy of the UK? The answer is, of course it is. Because if you have something which is almost the same, and you make the changes in it, you are making these changes to have it less similar to the template that we depart from. But this is at the same time the opportunity for the EU to see what you can do with this system, what will work proposed in the country like UK. So the pro for us is the possibility to see the results. And when we were discussing with Liz Denham and her team 3 years ago on the future international role of the ICO, we were stressing that this way of making the changes and showing what can work better is probably the most important thing that Europe will look at. These are the sandboxes, definitely. These are the cooperation with the other authorities. I would say at least about the changes that you already done, making the memorandum of understanding between the competition authorities and the ICO. At the same time, we have to say that EDPB is not the lawmaker. EDPB can work only on this that has been delivered by the Commission and by the Parliament and by the Council. And they were very clear, I mean commissioners were very clear at the conference that we organized 2 weeks ago, saying there will be no changes in GDPR by the end of this mandate of the Parliament and the Commission. So if you think about the changes to the Act will not be open before the end of the term. It would not work. The possibility to do the whole action from the beginning to the very end is very doubtful. But EDPB can work on the material that we have. And these are the proposals that have been presented to you by my colleagues yesterday. These are the ways of cooperation that we think about at the moment and that we discuss with the data protection commissioners from European Union countries and the European Economic Area. We have to remember that Norway especially plays an incredible role in setting, once again, the examples, once again sandboxes, I would say, but also the cooperation with the consumer authorities. And this is also what EDPS wants to stress as the main work for the next months. But remembering about that, we have to move forward and to find out where can we find the examples to follow and which parts do not work. That's why we organized the conference, which I was sometimes accused of having some political agenda over this conference. And I would like to say once again, there was no political agenda in it. We really wanted to gather the models that exist and the models that can exist in the EU and to compare the one that we have at the moment, which is working but needs the adjustments with those that exist in the other places in the world. I can't say that we found the model to which we would like to switch. Also, looking at the other sectors of the European law, we didn't find the proper template to take from. But we had an opportunity to find out where the ideas go to and where the changes are expected. What is outcome, in my opinion, of this discussion is definitely unequal burden sharing by the data protection authorities, is the procedural differences which make the bottlenecks, but also the fact that the involvement of the EDPB comes sometimes too late, or even there is too less of this involvement. So that is probably the path that we should think about. Looking at the solutions that were proposed in the EU acts, in the currently prepared, drafted, like the one about anti-money laundering. We had the commissioners who were interested to comment on that, with Commissioner Vestager, Commissioner Reinders, Commissioner Jourova being with us. We had EDPB presenting the plans. We had also some representatives of the journalistic society present there and commenting and also gathering the results.
And that's Max Schrems, fellow.
Yes, and we had those who started somehow the discussion on the real meaning of the principles that are nicely written in the treaty. And here I would come to the last part of this short presentation, which is about the consumer protection community and the civic society movements, which we think have shown us the questions which we never asked as data protection authorities. And I'm saying that remembering that everything which Max Schrems asked in his first case and the second case are the things that I'm, as the data protection authority in one of the member states, should ask 10 years before him. And I didn't do it. And that seems to be one of the problems that we can see at the moment, that we are, as DPAs, too shy to ask, or too defensive to ask the questions that are asked by the community, by the consumer protection community, and by the civic society movements. And that drives me to the cooperation that we have with the civic society on effectiveness of the work which is done. One of the things which were said quite openly by the civic societies is that they are worried that the procedure at the Data Protection Authority is giving too less to the real complainant. Even if it does a lot in the policy meaning and the changes for the future, the actual outcome for the person who complained is actually not visible. So in this sense, they think that it's probably better for the complainant to try to find the ways to circumvent the DPAs and go directly to the courts. But that it means that we start to base the enforcement actions on the very unstable ground of the consumer protection law and the collective actions in the EU. So I had an opportunity to speak at the BEUC conference recently, and the BEUC, as the representative of the consumer organizations, was speaking at the conference organized by EDPS. And that drove me back to the other discussion which I had with BEUC just before the lockdown. We went for the, let's say, annual meeting that we had with BEUC, and with a list of the cases that we wanted to discuss about. And we found out that just before the lockdown, BEUC has prepared the comprehensive assessment of the procedures, of enforcement procedures in GDPR, and suggested the recommendations. You will find in the presentation, which will be available for all the participants, you will find these recommendations. Actually, two of them are directed to the member states, not to the European institutions and not to the DPAs. But I would say it's surprisingly similar. They are surprisingly similar to the outcomes of the Vienna summit of the data protection authorities in April 2022. So the only difference is that they were done already 2 years before. So without looking what the consumer protection organizations and what the consumer protection commissioners are doing in this field, we are actually academic in the worst meaning of this word. And all is said, I'm in the very comfortable situation, and I can take as the EDPS, as the Data Protection Authority on the EU level, I can take the example from all the countries. But unfortunately, the situation of the Consumer Protection Society and the commissioners look very different in the member states. And there are the states where the organizations are strong. There are the states where the commissions for consumer protection are strong. And they are the real partners in this discussion, sometimes very hard partners, because this is not only the synergy what we have with the consumer protection agencies, these are also tensions. There are the cases which they started 3.5 years ago and they don't have an answer in the DPAs. You heard today about the action that is organized in the Google case, and we will see how it will look like in the member states. So that's hard cooperation, but first of all giving us wonderful examples, and Finn, I guess, is one of the persons whom we the most often meet from the Consumer Protection Society because of that, and also the place where we get an assessment of the strong organizations that tried to find out if what is said in the law is the real truth. So that's the place in which I will stop this presentation, but I'm of course happy to answer all the questions that will arise.
Okay, thank you.